really appreciate you having me here today. I love your brand, by the way, and I should say I'm not here today as the president and CEO of the PRLA. I'm here as somebody who's been in industry about 40 years, in the restaurant business, the hotel business, and the club business, and now running associations. I've been a franchisor, just like Gary and Russ and the team here. I've been a franchisee. In fact, we were the largest franchisee of IHG hotels, and we franchised 4 of the 5 major hotel brands. So I know that side of it as well. I love your brand. Now, when I took over the PRLA 4 years ago, I found out that as crazy as it sounds, it's the first time I'd run an association, that associations also are members of associations. I don't know whether that makes any sense, but there's like 5 associations that our associations are members of. One of them is the PSAE, that stands for Pennsylvania Society of Association Executives. And so we have a monthly meeting, which is a CEO roundtable, where we all get together and talk about better ways to run our associations. And I'm a foodie. I've been a foodie my entire life. We go to these meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's no breakfast. So I said, this is crazy. How can you guys not have breakfast at a breakfast meeting? So one month I took bagels. Bagels sat there the whole time. Nobody touched a single one. The second month I took, 2 months later, I took Dunkin' Donuts. Nobody touched a single donut. And then you open the Mechanicsburg restaurant. Who's the Mechanicsburg in here? Open the Mechanic. I think I might have met you there, in fact. I think we tweeted out a picture of the 2 of us together. So the Mechanicsburg restaurant opened. I met with Gary and Sophia. I went over there to pick up the donuts. And I learned about your brand then. And I love the fact that you make them to order, and that it's there's a concept in the burger world called better burgers. And I would call your donut the better donut. And it is the better donut. I love that it's made to order. And what was really cool is that the team there interacted with me while the donuts were being cooked, brought me into the process, so I didn't feel like I had to wait. Didn't feel that way at all. If I'd known before I went in they were going to be made to order, I might have had some apprehension, but I had no apprehension once I left. Took them to the meeting, said, hey, I have some donuts from Duck Donuts today. They said, Duck Donuts? I said, well, you might want to try one. Every single donut was eaten that day. It was phenomenal. It was just a really great test of the product. So yesterday you learned about terrific ways to deliver service at your restaurants. And you talked about the culture of, and you understand the culture of Duck Donuts, that this is a family operation treating your guests like family. You learned some techniques to deliver good service. My contention is, and I'm going to give you a little bit of history on how I got to this point, that you cannot make people deliver good service. You can only make people want to deliver good service. So hopefully what we talk about today, the service-profit relationship, creating a great place to work culture, will give you the backbone you need to get the service delivered that you talked about yesterday. Now, how many in here are owners, if I may ask? There's a lot of owners in here. And how many are managers? Okay? So we have a good mix. So for owners, it's important that managers understand the culture. For managers, it's important that team members understand the culture. My contention is, as a franchise owner, was that the most important person in my life was a general manager. So if I had good general managers in my restaurants, I had a great life. If I had bad ones, my life was miserable. And the question is, how do you deliver the culture at that level? So we're going to talk a bit about that today. All right, so there's something, when I was in the hotel business, my first job as a hotel manager was in 1987. Took over a hotel. When I walked in, it was a very oppressive environment. The team members were very afraid of the leadership there. There was about 30 department heads, about 200 employees, and it was a very oppressive environment, and we frankly were not getting very good service scores. And we were a company that was formed on the concept that we had to provide great service because we had originally one hotel. I opened the second one. No national name recognition, no 800 number, no reservation system. We were competing against all the big guys, so the only thing we had was service. And this hotel wasn't delivering it. So I tried to delve in and figure out how I could get it to be delivered, and I came up with a pretty simple concept. The concept was that if I took good care of the team members, which was not happening there at the time, they would take good care of the guests. By the way, back then we called them employees, so I use the term employees, team members interchangeably today. They'd take care of the guests, and we'd be profitable. So it was just a concept. But I decided I was going to revolve my focus as general manager around creating a great place to work. All right. So 10 years later, there was a book written called The Service Profit Chain, which was my hotel profit chain. I wish I'd written the book. And it expounded the exact same theory, that employee satisfaction will lead to guest satisfaction, will lead to profits. So I felt like this was important in my hotel. And by the way, our guest service scores did very well once we did that. In fact, one of my proudest days is I got a call from Chip Bell. I don't know whether you know Chip, but he writes some great books on service. A lot of his are called Knock Your Socks Off Service. He's written about 20 books on service. And it was about 7 o'clock at night. I picked up the phone in my office, and he says, is this John Longstreet? And I said, yes, it is. He says, wow, you do answer your phone. And I said, well, I do when I'm at my phone. He says, I'm in my guest room, and I read your letter. I put a letter in all the guest rooms. If there's anything we can do better about your stay, call me directly, and I'll take care of it. And he said, I want you to know that I've been conducting seminars here for about 3 weeks now for MCI, a very famous former telecom company, and I've never had a place where the people treat me better than in this hotel. And I want you to come speak at my speak in my sessions and talk to them about how to deliver good service. I had no idea what we were doing except the hotel profit chain. So it was working there. So when the book came out in 1995, started to talk about, well, if we really believe in this, we've got to also prove it to be true, because this was just a theory by Hessen and Sasser and Schlesinger. It was just a theory by me that had some anecdotal evidence in my hotel, but it wasn't, no one had ever proved it out. If you take care of your team members, will you really be more profitable? If you invest more in team members, will that become profitable? So what we did is we worked with two partners, Tony Simons from Cornell University and Judy McLean Brown, I think was her name, from Wash U in St. Louis. We said, we want to try to determine whether the service profit chain really works. We put together a study. At the time, we had about 100 hotels. We had about 10,000 employees. And we had guest satisfaction scores from guests throughout all of the hotels for the year. So what they were able to do is we did an employee survey, and we found the hotels that had the best employee satisfaction, and we rated those against the ones that had the best guest service scores and profitability. Long story made short, the study proved out that there was a direct correlation between employee satisfaction and profitability in a big way. So then we took it, a few years later, I left. We sold the company, by the way. We started out with one hotel in 1983. We sold it as the largest independent hotel company in North America in 2000, billion-dollar company, to IHG, Intercontinental Hotels Group. When I left there, I went over to work at Club Corp, and we wanted to prove the same thing out at Club Corp. Anybody know what Club Corp is? It's the most global hotel company, club company. It has 160 clubs, both country clubs and business clubs, and they're member clubs, but they're run by a company. So anyway, at Club Corp, we tried to prove the same thing out, because there I was the EVP of people strategy, which is HR. And we wanted to put more money into certain employee benefits to try to improve our member satisfaction, our member retention, and our member sales effort. So what we did is we asked Judy McLean Brown and Tony Simons to help us develop a protocol where we could tie the two together. And this is, again, like they did at the hotel company. This is what they found out. This graph here shows that this is employee satisfaction. We call them EEs, employees. 68% on the left, the middle, and the right. And then on the bottom graph, it shows the member survey. So if the employee satisfaction was higher, the member satisfaction was higher. So a 73.5% index on employee satisfaction led to 81 to 95 on guest. 70% was 74 to 83, and if you were down at a 68, you had a 52 to 74% satisfaction with members. It was direct correlation. Then we took it to the next step, and we took the member survey versus GOP as a percentage of plan. We controlled all the budgets, so the budgets were consistent from one to another. We took this and we said, okay, is there a correlation to GOP? And we found out there was. 52 to 74% member survey index, they were behind plan significantly, almost 10% behind plan. At 74 to 83, they were just behind. 83 to 91, they exceeded plan. So what did this allow us to do? It allowed us to go to our board of directors and say, we need to improve some things that have come up in the employee survey that are issues. One of them was our benefits. And by the way, we didn't change a single benefit, but we repackaged the benefits the way we delivered them to the employees. We just put in better material, better explanations, better training about their benefits. Our benefit satisfaction went from 39%, up to 79% just by repackaging them and doing a better job educating. But we focused on taking care of the employees, the team members, and it showed up in the surveys and it increased the profitability. So why is this important? Because if you're going to get out there and you're going to say, we're going to focus totally on making this a great place to work, there's got to be a business case for it too. Because let's face it, we want to treat our guests like family. We want to treat our employees like family, but we also have to stay in business. Because if we don't stay in business, that's not good for anybody. So there is a business case for it, and this is what this proved up. By the way, just to add a little bit more to that, we also looked at the 100 best places to work versus the Standard & Poor's 500, the annualized stock market returns. And if you look at the light blue bar, those are the 100 best places to work, their annual stock market returns over a 3, 5, and 10-year period. The dark is the overall 500, Standard & Poor's 500. So the places that are rated the best places to work absolutely do better. This is an interesting one to me, and this is called Workplace Elements of Importance to Employees. And the left side of it is objective factors, such as the far left is base pay. The right side, starting right here and over, is subjective. The top one there is manager quality. So what this says to you, if you want to make your team members happy, is number one, you have to pay them right. So the number one thing is base pay. These are for hourly line level employees. The number two thing of all criteria, subjective or objective, is manager quality. In other words, do I have a supervisor that takes good care of me, that I like working for? So hiring the right managers, having a good supervisor, is really, really important. It's critically important. By the way, when you put the same bar chart together for exempt employees, or what we might call managers, the number one reason that they take and keep a job is their supervisor. It's even more important than base pay. So putting focus on getting good managers, training them well, and giving them the resources to take care of your team members is going to pay off for you. All right, so this is where we get into the meat of the discussion. I'm going to try to punctuate this with a few stories along the way, so you can understand why I think these things are important. The top 10 ways to create a great place to work culture is what I have found to work over the years in the hotel business, the restaurant business, and the club business. You may disagree with them. I don't think any of them are counter to the duck culture, but if they are, we can debate that sometime. So the first one, and these are not necessarily in any order of importance, is what we call display ownership and live the I plan. Okay. When you leave the franchise conference today, there's going to be some things that you're going to take back to your stores. I don't know whether you call them restaurants or stores. I always like to call them restaurants, but let's call them stores too. Your stores. And there are going to be some decisions that are made here in Annapolis that you may not totally agree with. So you take it back to your store, and you have two ways you can introduce it to your team. You can say, here's a new initiative we're going to put on at our Duck Donuts here. I think it's going to be really good for business. This is why. Let's all get behind it. Let's do it. Or you can go back and say, those guys up in Mechanicsburg, they think we ought to be doing this now, so I don't really agree with it, but we're going to be doing it. The first way that you did it causes you to grow in stature with your team members and have them to respect you more. The second way causes them to respect you less. So this is called display ownership and live the I plan. By the way, this organization, like most good organizations, gives you an opportunity to talk about things. That's why you're here. So you have an opportunity to get involved in the decision. When you go back, you must display ownership and live the I plan. If you're a manager, like our friend in Mechanicsburg, and the owner says you're the manager or the owner, I'm sorry. Okay, all right, okay. Anyway, whatever. So the manager, when the owner comes in and says, hey, from now on we're going to do things this way, the manager must walk out of the room, arm in arm, lockstep, with the message and deliver it as his or her message, not as the message from somebody else. Okay, maintain the back of the house like the front. So why would this be important if you follow the service profit chain? a service-profit relationship. Why would it be important to maintain the back of the house? Your back of the house is your front of the house to a large degree. But if you have an employee area in your restaurant or in your store, it has to be maintained like the front of the house. Why would that be important? I'm sorry? It's their environment. True. And if you believe in the service profit chain, who's the most important person to take care of? Because they started, the team member. So we got it when I was with IHG. When we sold the company to IHG, I went over there and became the and worked for them. And so I had a portfolio of 64 hotels. And we got a new chief operating officer, Tom Murray. And Tom came out to visit one of my hotels, the Holiday Inn in San Antonio. I understand we have somebody here from San Antonio. Holiday Inn Riverwalk on San Antonio, great city. So we walk in the hotel, and Sean Kenworthy, the GM, greets us. He's meeting the chief operating officer of the world's biggest hotel company for the first time. Big moment for him. He says, Mr. Murray, welcome to the Holiday Inn Riverwalk, San Antonio. I'd like to show you around. He said, where would you like to start? Would you like to see some guest rooms, see the restaurant? And Tom says, I'd like to see the employee cafeteria. And so Sean said, well, sure. So they go down to the employee cafeteria, and it was okay. It was decent. Wasn't great. It was slightly better than embarrassing, probably. And Tom said, Sean, I think you need to do some work in the employee cafeteria, and if you need some money to do work in here, talk to John about it. Because I think we need to be feeding our employees like we feed our guests. Well, the next day, all the hotels in the portfolio, the GMs were back painting their cafeterias. Nothing else had to be said. And that was an important message about you've got to take care of the team members if you're going to take care of the guests, if they're going to take care of the guests. When I was a hotel general manager, and I maybe lost sight of this by the time I became a regional, but I used to often take clients to have lunch in the employee cafeteria. They would come in and I'd say, hey, I'd walk them through the kitchen, introduce them to the chef, all that kind of stuff, and I'd say, how about some lunch? And they say, sure, we're going to eat in Sarducci's or Remington's, our two restaurants. I said, let's eat the employee cafeteria. So we go back in the employee cafeteria, and they say, wow, this food is really great. I said, can you imagine if this food is this good, how good it is in our banquets and restaurants? So it's it also pays off to do business that way.
Joanna, could you come here a minute, please?
Yeah. I'm sorry I was late. I was having lunch, and
We need to talk about your flare.
Really? I have 15 pieces on.
Well, okay, 15 is the minimum. Okay.
Okay.
Now, it's up to you whether or not you want to just do the bare minimum, or, well, like Brian, for example, has 37 pieces of flare on today. Okay. A terrific smile.
Okay, so you want me to wear more?
Look, Joanna,
Yeah.
people can get a cheeseburger anywhere, okay? They come to Tchotchkes for the atmosphere and the attitude. Okay, that's what the flare's about. It's about fun.
Yeah. Okay, so more than, yeah?
Look, we want you to express yourself, okay? Now, if you feel that the bare minimum is enough, then okay. But some people choose to wear more, and we encourage that, okay? You do want to express yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's all I ask.
So what's the message here? It's not an easy message. Anybody got an idea what it might be? Okay. What's happening here is they're trying to essentially legislate culture, saying we're going to create culture by having a certain number of pieces of flair be worn. One of our prime competitors when I was a hotel manager was the Renaissance Richardson. It was a fabulous hotel compared to mine, which is a fairly basic hotel. And we were always concerned they were going to take our business away. And we would come into a department head meeting, and my sales manager would say, hey, the Renaissance just rolled out a new service program. We better watch it. And I said, we don't need to worry. And they said, what do you mean? I said, as long as they believe that service is delivered by a program rather than by a culture, we're always going to beat them. And we did. We beat them hands down. So what this demonstrates is that they're trying to have a policy to deliver a good service product. And in fact, it's delivered by a philosophy. That's the culture of it. If you develop the right philosophy in your organization and you have the tools, then your team members in the service culture, your team members will deliver the service you want to deliver. assuming they agree with you. And let me tell a quick story about the 3 GMs. When we bought a hotel company, it had about 60 hotels in it, and it had been not particularly well run. And we were concerned about growing from essentially 10 hotels to 70 hotels. And I did some articles for the press, and they said, how are you going to export the Bristol culture into these new hotels? Because you're all known for culture. You're a service organization. That's why people go to Bristol hotels. It's your service reputation. I said, well, number one, if we think we can export it from Dallas to Omaha, Nebraska, and all the other hotels we bought, we're going to fail. The only thing we can do is we can find people that already believe in what we believe in. In the case of Duck Donuts, believe in treating team members and guests like family. Find people that believe in that and then reinforce that in them. Give them the tools and the encouragement to do it. So we had 3 kinds of GMs when we rolled out our culture. One that said, well, I've always wanted to act like that, but the company never let me do that before. They were always so prone to numbers and policies and procedures that I could never do it. I'm very excited. I'm shot from guns. That means excited. It's an old expression. And then there was a second kind that said, I don't know. I don't know about this, but I'm willing to give it a try. There was a third kind that said, look, I'm the boss. I tell people what to do. Their job is to do it. And so consequently, I'm not really going to go along with this. The third group either self-selected out or we asked them to leave. About half the second group came into the culture. The first group did a phenomenal job. So you've got to be driven by philosophy, not policy, and you've got to treat team members, employees, like guests, which we already talked about. We talked about the employee cafeteria. One other thing that we used to do, we had GM school where we would do training programs for new general managers, and one of them was the GM quiz. It's a very simple quiz. There's 4 people sitting in the office waiting to see you. A team member, an employee, the president of the company, a guest, and a vendor. Rate in order how you're going to see those people. So what's the number 1? Who are you going to see first? Who said guest? Okay. Anybody else have a different answer? Who said employee? San Antonio, did you say employee? Okay. All right. The answer is, the real answer, if you believe in the service profit chain, is employee. But what we used to practice is we would see the guest first because our employees understood they were the most important, but that we had to make the guests feel like they were the most important. So nobody said president or vendor. That's probably good. Vendors are important. They're important partners, and certainly the president's important. So we used to do these kind of things to reinforce what was important. So when we did this survey, there was a question on there about trust and how well do you trust your manager. And this is in the back at Club Corp. And the average score on trust, if you take across the entire United States of how much you trust your manager, is somewhere below 50%. It's sad. It's really sad. And it's one of my biggest things is to try to improve that. The average score maybe in Club Corp was 70%. It was slightly better. Maybe it was 60%. We got one that was 97%. So I got the survey, 97%, and I called up Tom Carter, general manager of this club, Northwood Country Club in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and I said, Tom, I said, you scored 97% on the trust question on the employee survey. I said, what are you doing down there? And he said, is that good? And I said, no, that's not good. That's off the charts. Nobody scores above 80. The average nationwide is below 50. Our company average is 65. You scored 97. He said, I don't know, John, I just try to be transparent. And so what he said is that I share everything I can with the team members, not as little as I can get away with, and I try to bring them into everything that I do. That's his simple philosophy. I try to be transparent. So this gets into have open management styles and practice transparency. We discovered, and this is just one example, we discovered again back when I was a hotel GM, that when we did the weekly department head meeting, and we would all get together and go into a banquet room, close the doors, and talk about the things we talked about, the employees always assumed that we were in there plotting how to make their life more miserable. They did. They would be cowering in fear. They wanted to stay as far away from it as they could. So we developed something that I learned from elected office. I also had an opportunity to serve as mayor of the city of Plano, Texas, what we called the open meetings rule. Every meeting, scheduled meeting in our hotel was open to all employees to attend. Now, obviously, they couldn't attend somebody's performance review. But if it was like a staff meeting or something like that, we found out, and they got paid. If they were off duty, they got paid to attend. Not very many people came, but it changed the total philosophy of the way we did business, and they learned something, is that the two things we talked about most in our team meetings, in our department head meetings, were how to make it a better place to work, how to take better care of our guests. And by the way, the answer to how to take better care of the guests mostly come from the employees, not from us. So it was very productive for us to do that. So we had open meetings and we practiced transparency. One of the other things I did when I took over the hotel, and I told you about the oppressive environment, I was lamenting to our CEO, Pete Klein, about it. And I said, you know, I have an open door policy. I said, but nobody comes to see me. There was such a bad environment set up here. What am I going to do? And he said, why don't you take your door off? I said, what? And he said, take your door off. So I went back and I called our chief engineer, Tommy Foster, and I said, Tommy, would you come up here and bring your tool belt with you? He came up and I said, I'd like you to take my door off. He said, yes, sir. He was a yes sir, no sir kind of guy, no questions asked. Took the door off, holding the door there. He says, what do you want me to do with it? And I said, whatever you want. I'm not going to be needing it back. He said, okay, yes, sir. So he left. And interestingly enough, over the next couple of weeks, most of the other department heads took their doors off too. Now, when people walk by an office where the door's closed, they assume something's bad's happening inside. When they walk by a door where there is no door, they don't even try to figure out what's going on in there because they don't have any interest in it. So we built every hotel we built from the ground up after that. We had open offices, no offices at all. Worked really well for us. This was part of having open management styles. All right, be results, not efforts oriented. This is called, anybody know what FaceTime is? Yeah? My new son-in-law, my daughter got married last week in Atlanta. It was a joyous time for us, but my new son-in-law is a golf course assistant superintendent. And he goes to work at about 5 o'clock in the morning when he leaves his house, and he gets home about 8 o'clock at night. So I was talking to him about it. I said, Jacob, I said, you know, you work really long hours. He said, yeah, I know. And I said, what are you doing the whole time? He says, mostly I'm waiting for Brett to go home. And I said, what do you mean? Well, he's the superintendent, and I have to be there as long as he's there. I said, so as soon as he goes home, then you go home. He said, yeah, that's right. And unfortunately, he works really late. So that's called FaceTime. So we put into place a procedure where there was no FaceTime. It's easy to say, hard to do. And we asked our managers to we discovered something. This was when we started campus recruiting back in the mid-'80s, as we weren't getting the best people off the campuses for our hotel company. And it was because we were the typical hotel company working 80, 90 hours a week. And you know what we used to call that when you would hire somebody and they would have to come out and work 80, 90 hours a week? Paying their dues. And the Gen Xers we were trying to hire didn't believe in paying dues. And by the way, and neither do millennials. And by the way, I think they're right. So we changed it. We adopted a 55-hour work week, 5.5-day work week, 5 10-hour days, and a 5-hour day. Sounds like a lot. Not a lot in the hotel business. We became revolutionary for that. And we actually asked people to write down their hours, not to keep track, because you can't do that with an exempt employee, but to have a goal of when they wanted to go home. The hotel we tested it in started with 30 managers the year we tested it. The next year, we had 20 managers because they were so much more productive, working less hours, and our profitability was up, and we didn't supplement it with hourly employees. So quality of life is really important. So you have to be results, not efforts oriented. I don't want people hanging around just because they think I'm still there. I want them getting the job done and getting out as fast as they can and being rewarded that way. And remember, it's okay to have fun. You have to set the example. We had a friendliest hotel contest. We had 10 hotels at the time, and my hotel won friendliest hotel contest maybe the first 3 months we had the contest, and then they disbanded the contest because no one else could ever win. And not because I was so good, but because not everyone else got it. And Dave Fulton, who ran our biggest hotel out at DFW Airport, called me one day and said, how do you always win this contest? And I said, what time do you go home at night? He said, that doesn't have anything to do with it. I said, it does have something to do with it. I said, what time do you go home at night? He said, so they usually go home at 9 o'clock. I said, I'm guessing your people are working a lot longer hours than mine are, because I typically go home at 6 o'clock. Sometimes I come back and check on things, but I'm out of there at 6. And he said, what's that have to do with it? I said, remember the service profit chain. It really works. So the 55-hour work week was huge when we did that. And that's part of insisting on a balance of life. We found that when people did something outside of work, they were much better in work. to not only, we developed something that we called the Circle of Life, and we asked our managers each to put in there the 4 most important things to them in their life. I'm talking about broad categories. For some, it's sports. For some, it's physical fitness. For some, it might be family. For some, it might be community. And then work has to go on there somewhere. And then to try to draw the wheel and how much time they're spending at each one and try to get a balance where they're doing all of those things that they want to do to make them happy. If all you do is work and go home, you're not going to be as productive, as successful, and you're certainly not going to create a great place to work.
They look a little nervous.
I need all flight crews to report to their designated areas immediately.
Major. Borrow that. Sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind. Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interest. Perhaps it's fate that today is the 4th of July, and you will once again be fighting for our freedom. Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live, to exist. And should we win the day, the 4th of July will no longer be known as an American holiday, but as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.
So who knows this movie? Okay, a lot of people. What happens right after this scene? Remember? Yeah. I'm sorry? Okay, so they had a battle, and who led the battle? And who is that? Yeah, Bill Pullman, thank you. And what's the character he's playing in that? He's playing the president. So the president gets in a jet fighter with everybody else and rides off to battle. And this is illustrative of maybe what I think is the most important principle of leadership. I had an opportunity to meet Michael Abrashoff very early in his career. He wrote a book called It's Your Ship. Anybody read It's Your Ship? If I had to pick, thank you, if I had to pick a leadership book, that would be it. There's been hundreds of books written on leadership. That would be the one, It's Your Ship. I met Michael Abrashoff before he wrote the book. He was the commander, the new commander of a ship in the U.S. Navy called the USS Benfold. USS Benfold had the worst performance scores of any ship in the U.S. Navy when he took it over. He went onto the ship, and as he went onto the ship, there's a ceremony, you've seen this in the movies before, where he goes on and he shakes hands with or salutes the existing commander walks off, and he becomes commander of it. When the existing commander walked off the Benfold, the sailors cheered, but they were not cheering in a well-wishing cheer. They were cheering because they were so glad to see the commander leave. Abrashoff, in his first command, said, I'm never going to let that happen to me. So he developed what he called grassroots side-by-side leadership, which is totally different than the typical Navy command and control leadership that was being employed at the time. First thing he did is he sat down with every one of the 350 sailors and got to know them, not only their names, a little bit about their family, their goals and aspirations in life, and showed them that they were an important part of the team. Not too long after he started on there, they were doing every Wednesday they would do a buffet up on the deck. Lunch buffet would be outside. And so he went and got in line with the buffet, and one of his officers came over and said, "Commander," he said, "we go to the front of the line." He said, "I think I'm fine where I am here." Went through the line with the sailors, sat down at a table which was down on the lower deck. All the other officers were sitting on the upper deck. One of the officers came down and said, "Commander, we have a seat for you up there." He said, "I like this seat down here." And his whole style was side by side. If I can't work side by side with you, I can't expect you to do the things that need to get done to make this ship perform. Again, long story made short, when he left his command of the ship, which I think was somewhere less than 3 years later, it was the #1 rated ship in the U.S. Navy in all respects, and it had the highest re-enlistment rate. He had 100% re-enlistment rate. So everybody wanted to re-enlist, was on the ship. In fact, people were trying to get on the ship from other ships because they'd heard about all the things he did. Read the book and see all the other things he did, but the concept is, the theory is very simple. It's a no executive, hands-on management style, side-by-side leadership. In fact, we had executive offices in all of our hotels, and we changed them to general offices because we wanted to get the term executive out of there. We wanted to have no executive philosophy. We had executive committees. We no longer had executive committees. They were department head meetings. So those are the kind of things that every signal that you send has to do with the culture that you create. And then last of these was focusing on the individual need, not just the company needs. This is always a little controversial when I bring it up, but we noticed that we were losing campus recruits as the company grew older. We noticed we were losing them, usually around 7 years. You've ever heard of the 7-year itch? It actually is real. It's not just a theory, it's real. And the worst part is you start losing them at 5 years mentally, and then you lose them physically at 7 years. So we said, how can we overcome this? We created a program, which is a sabbatical program. For a relatively small at the time hotel company, it was a big deal. And all managers, any exempt employee, had an opportunity to take a sabbatical after every 7 years of service. And if they were already there when we rolled the program in, they got credit for a certain number of the years they already served. So you say, well, how could you do that? And the sabbatical was 6 weeks. And they could add up to 2 weeks of vacation to it. And the only thing that they had to do was have a plan. Didn't have to have anything to do with work, but they had to have a plan because we didn't want people just taking off 8 weeks and wasting their time. We wanted them to remember that the company made this possible. My sabbatical, I bought a very inexpensive used motorhome and took our young children, and we traveled around the United States for 8 weeks. And our kids still talk about it today. They're 30 and 32 today. Never would have happened had that not happened. Now, while people were gone, things would happen. I'm still going to be 45 minutes, but we started a hair late. Okay. All right. So while we were gone, things would happen. And let me give you an example. You say, well, how do you cover it? Well, if you think about it, it's a little bit harder in a small store. But in most of our hotels, we could cover it. So in my case, when I took my sabbatical, my boss, John Beckert, said, who's going to fill in for you while you're gone? I said, Donna Como. She's a director of catering. He says, I'm not sure Donna is going to be able to do it. I said, she's the best I have. Give her a shot. I said, Donna, I'd like you to fill in. She said, I'm not so sure that I can be a GM for 8 weeks. I said, I think you can. Let's do it. So, and I said, by the way, I want you to act like I'm never coming back. I don't want you postponing decisions and doing, I want you to actually run the place and maybe improve it while I'm gone. So a couple of things happened. One, she fired my assistant while I was gone. And she said, you don't need an assistant. You can share an assistant with the sales department and we can save $40,000 a year, or whatever it was back then. And I said, okay. And then she did a few other things. And then I met with my boss and he said, by the way, Donna Como is phenomenal. She's phenomenal. And I said to Donna, I said, how do you feel about what you did? She said, I think I could be a GM someday. When we sold the company in 2000, she was the executive vice president of catering for the entire billion-dollar company. So, and after that, she became the chief operating officer for Prism Hotels. We sold the company, another significant company. So just because she had that opportunity to do that, and she made my hotel better. The only rule we had was that you couldn't be fired when you came back, because a lot of people wouldn't go because they think there'd be skeletons and ghosts and things like that. They'd come back and get fired, so you couldn't be fired. But the other thing that happened is sometimes people would come back and resign. They'd say, I decided, based on the 8 weeks I was off, that I want to go grow herbs in Colorado or something like that. And that's fine, because at least we made a decision. Most people came back recharged, had a new vision on life, and it was really good for the company. So this is a point of focusing on the individual needs, not just the company needs. When you treat people with that kind of focus, it's a funny thing. They're really going to deliver for your guests. The reason Tony Simons wanted to do the service profit chain study with us is because he wanted to write a book on trust, which he ultimately did. And he added an element into the survey about trust. I talked about Tom Carter in Lawrenceville, Georgia, Northwood Country Club, with a 97% trust quotient. So he introduced that in that, and then he did a study which was published in the Harvard Business Journal called The Cost of Lost Trust. You can still find it, and wrote a book that I'll tell you about in a second that this is discussed in it, all based on the study at Bristol Hotels. What he learned was that a $10 million hotel, which was the average revenue of our hotels back then, could achieve $250,000 more in profit by increasing the trust index by 1/8 of a point. A $10 million hotel could achieve $250,000, $250,000 more in profit by increasing the trust index by 1/8 of a point. So this is the book he wrote, The Integrity Dividend. For a book that was written by a college professor, it's actually readable. Most of those are not readable. This one you could actually read. Tony did a great job with it. I suggest you take a look at it. But here's some things that you can close the trust gap with, and I'm about ready to conclude here. And this, to me, is the most important thing. It drives me crazy to think that my team members don't trust me. And in fact, you think everybody trusts you. If you did a survey, you'd find out it's not that way. So you've got to every day be focusing on that. And the first is be open and honest with employees, exhibit highly ethical behavior. I spoke maybe about 2 months ago to the Meeting Planners International about leadership ethics and why it's important. It's extremely important. And again, you work for an organization that believes in that from the top down. So you certainly can do it in your restaurants as well. Engage in societal issues. This means, by the way, did you know that over 90% of restaurants give back to their community through charitable causes? I mean, everybody should know that. That's one of the things we're trying to get out. And not only do your team members love that about you, but so do your guests, particularly millennial guests. Millennials will tell you they'd much rather do business with somebody, with a company that has a societal cause. Take action when needed. The absolute worst thing that can happen, even PRLA, when I took over a little PRLA, and I interviewed each one of my team members like Abrashoff did with his 350 sailors, I said, tell me the things that you like most about PRLA and the things that you like least. And one of the ones that every one of them said, one of the things I like least is that we move too slowly on things. And then they would follow it up by saying, but I understand why that is, because as CEO, you have to go through the board of directors and so on and so forth. None of that was true. It was an excuse not to take action. And so what we started doing was taking action. And you know what? People loved it. The team members loved it. Share personal values and history. I started, when I was running the hotel, Tommy Foster, that same chief engineer from Arkansas, we were sitting in a department head meeting one day, and I started trying to make a point. And he said, John, are you going to tell another one of your stories? And I said, well, Tommy, actually, I think I am. I said, why? He said, because I love when you tell stories. Well, people love when you tell stories because it makes it real and it makes it something that they can remember. So sharing personal values and history is really important. I love presidents. I love the presidency. I watch president movies all the time because of that. I love that clip of Bill Pullman. It's one of the best president speeches there. But the thing that Ronald Reagan did as president, and I've learned a lot from Ronald Reagan, as those of you who were around then did too, is that he sometimes said things that others might have said were sappy, right? You know what sappy means? Yeah, sappy. I do that all the time, and I do that because he taught me that if you believe it, it's okay. If you believe it, you can say those things. And I think one of the things that people like about you is that you're genuine with them and tell them what you really believe and how you feel about things, like Ronald Reagan did. He was really good at that. He got away with it because he really believed it. All right, so E.M. Statler, who many people thought was, or described as the founder of the hotel industry, he opened the first Statler Hotel, which was actually in Buffalo Hotel, and then one in New York and a few others. Always said, life is service. The one who progresses is the one who gives his fellow men a little more, a little better service. So my trademark expression that I use probably once a week, if not once every other day, is life is service. And I believe it extends into everything that you do. And I think if you have that kind of culture, your team members will too. it'll deliver to your guests, and you'll make the money you need to make to be profitable. You have a terrific brand. I'm very excited about the growth of the brand, and excited about the fact that the founders are determined to grow the brand well. So I hope that if I can ever help you with anything, if you want to talk about things, obviously I have opinions on a lot, and please give me a buzz. Sophia can help you get in touch with me. I get calls all the time from members and non-members in Pennsylvania, but I talk to people all around the country. There's probably not a city that you operate in that I haven't operated in, and so I'd be happy to help in any way that I can. And with that, thanks again for the opportunity to be here, Sophia, Gary, Russ, really appreciate it.